Hi, I'm Chris Rabb with Free Speech TV at the Take Back the American Dream Conference in Washington, D.C. I'm here with Chuck Collins, a senior scholar at the Institute for Policy Studies. Welcome.
Good to be with you, Chris.
Yeah. So I got to ask you, what's this whole millionaire cabal you're hanging out with recently? Tell me what's going on. What are you trying to do with these people?
Well, really going back a couple years, there's a group of organized high-income folks who basically believe they should pay more taxes. And over the summer, that effort got a huge boost when Warren Buffett stepped up and said, look, stop coddling the rich. We can afford to pay more. And I think that in the context of this budget debate where, this is wrenching budget ceiling process, a lot of people are saying, hey, maybe millionaires should pay more. Maybe some of these companies that are dodging taxes. Right. So it's an organized effort.
Okay, but let me make sure I get this straight. You're saying that millionaires are speaking up and asking to be taxed more. Why would they do that?
That's right. Well, they see it as in their long-term self-interest to not live in a society with sort of grotesque inequalities. And many of them are people who understood that they got help. These are business owners, business leaders, people who started businesses. They weren't born in a state of nature. They understood that they are a product of communities and schools and public investments that made their own opportunities possible. One of our patriotic millionaires said, look, I got a Pell Grant. I want to make sure that other kids have the same opportunities I had. That's what America is. It's not just about us, this generation. It's about an intergenerational compact.
So what are the types of businesses that get away with paying very little in taxes? What are the two big camps, as it were, the ones that we perhaps should support and know more about and provide incentives to get them to do the right thing, and others that perhaps are more drains to the economy?
Well, I think right now there's a brand of businesses, global companies in the United States, whose business model is to shift their costs off of their balance sheet. They want to do that through outsourcing jobs, gaming their taxes to nothing, using offshore tax havens to play games, accounting gymnastics. And they're really not about employing people, and they're not about livelihoods and communities. Their whole business model is funneling money to the shareholders and to the top managers. The other side, there are businesses that are, what Jim Collins calls built-to-last businesses. They're in it for the long haul. They're not just like take the money and run. They're small businesses, anchored businesses in communities. They don't use the accounting games that these global companies use. And the irony is public policy those big companies keep coming and saying, we're the job creators, give us tax breaks and we'll create jobs. And then they take the money and park it offshore. That's not who we want to invest in.
So if there's one thing you want the Free Speech TV community to understand about this particular campaign, this particular movement, an idea around tax equity and patriotism as we define it as progressives, what would that be?
Well, I think that if I could say two things. One is that we shouldn't, as a country, subsidize the job killers. Right today, Congress is being lobbied intensely for a tax holiday for offshore companies that want to bring their money back. That's a terrible idea. We're going to release a report tomorrow showing that the top 58 companies that took the lion's share of the 2004 tax holiday breaks destroyed about 600,000 jobs. So that's not the future. The future is supporting domestic small businesses, the real engines of the economy. So that's one thing. The other thing is when people say, oh, we can't tax the wealthy because that's going to kill jobs. Listen, the wealthy are disproportionate beneficiaries of all the things we do together. The invisible capital you talk about, the investments in education and research and infrastructure that make it possible. And if they can't have a viable business and pay their fair share taxes, go find something else to do. But we, the taxpayers, shouldn't have to pick up the slack for them.
And is there a growing chorus of millionaires and responsible business owners who embrace these ideas?
Absolutely. In a way, it's kind of like the silent majority. The Wealth for the Common Good Network, Business for Shared Prosperity, the Patriotic Millionaires. There's thousands of basically folks stepping up, and they're the tip of the iceberg because they're the ones kind of willing to go out and be public and speak. A lot of people sort of just don't like to have the spotlight on them.
Right.
But polls show half the people, half the millionaires in this country that would pay the higher tax rates are like, so what? It's time to rebalance the tax code. It's time for us to play our role, you know. And I think that sentiment is growing. I think.
And how can people learn more about this movement, this campaign? Can they go online somewhere and find out more?
One spot is wealthforthecommongood.org, which is sort of the network of business leaders and wealthy individuals, businessforsharedprosperity.org. And if people are interested in these inequalities and taxes, inequality.org is the website that I co-edit on the disparities of wealth and power.
I love that website. The last question I want to ask you is, give me the most startling statistic. I mean, just put one out there that just has people's jaws dropping, because I know you're full of them. Give me one good one that perhaps most folks would have never heard on corporate media, perhaps.
We just did a report last week that showed that there are 25 companies, huge multinational companies, that pay their CEOs more than they paid in taxes last year. Meaning these are companies that will pay 12, 15, $40 million a year to compensate their executive, but they can't find a way to pay a nickel or a dime to support the infrastructure and the services that we all depend on. 25 companies pay their CEOs more than they pay Uncle Sam in taxes. You know, and we're talking Verizon, Boeing.
So these are all corporations that ostensibly generate billions of dollars.
These are hugely profitable, enormous companies that pay little or no taxes to the Treasury. And they're profitable. It's not like they lost money. And to me, that's an emblematic of the problem. Is like they think that their whole business model is to get the rest of us to pick up the slack for them, and like as if we owe them something. And you know, we want to have a business environment that's healthy for all types of enterprises. We don't need to subsidize those companies at this stage in history, especially when we have this huge debt and long overdue investments in education and other things we need to deal with.
Well, let me ask you another question. These are often partisan issues, but my sense is there's probably going to be a few millionaires who are Republican identified, or perhaps from a previous generation where they were taxed equitably. You know about the tax rates over the past the 20th century and such. They used to be taxed fairly well or equitably. So are there folks? Is everyone in this campaign Democrat identified, or?
No, you know, it's a really important point you're making, Chris. There's a generation of business leaders, many of them retired now, but they remember they grew businesses and they operated in an environment where they paid much higher taxes, and the world didn't end, and in fact their businesses benefited from a robust, healthy commonweal, and public investments and things that made the 50s and 60s and 70s possible for a lot of businesses. So they don't have this deep resentment of the tax man. None of us get excited about writing a check to the IRS, but they don't have this like deep pathological hatred towards government and the IRS. They see, that's the price you pay to live in a good society, and it's the price to pay to have a good, healthy business environment.
Well, isn't it also true that a lot of these mega corporations do business with the federal government? And isn't the federal government supported by our tax dollars?
I mean, take a company like Boeing. We, the people, just gave Boeing a $35 billion contract to build new planes, yet Boeing over the last 4 or 5 years has paid zero or almost minuscule amounts of taxes. So we don't even ask the companies that do business with us to chip in. So that's a very good example of a policy. If you want to do business with the people, with the people's government, tell us how many people you're going to employ, tell us what your taxes are, and pay your fair share.
Now,
it's reasonable.
Are there any things that can be done in the executive branch and through executive order based on just pure compliance, not new legislation from the legislative branch, but things that our president can do right now, given the power he has with the office of the president?
Well, the president actually, on the whole issue of the sort of tax loopholes and the offshore system, the president has done quite a bit to kind of enforce and work with other countries to develop treaties so that a company can't report one tax bill in another place and play countries off against each other. So there's some important things that we can do. But in the end, I think Congress has to act. They have to pass the Stop Tax Having Abuse Act. They have to raise top tax rates on millionaires. They have to let the Bush tax cuts for the wealthy expire. Those three things would generate about $400 billion a year.
What is it? What do we get with $400 billion? Everyone has a pet project program that we care about. What substantive in our federal budget could be helped by $400 billion? Just offhand, if you.
I mean, I think the greatest generation, some of these business people went to college debt-free. Why should any young person graduate from college with triple whammy debt, personal debt, credit card debt, and college debt? That's no way to start a life. And there's a young woman who I work with in my office. She has $100,000 of school debt. What options does she have other than to be on the debt treadmill? So that's a no-brainer. And I think the kind of infrastructure support, we're basically trying to run the country on the cheap now. We're going to somehow, be a world-class economy while we lay off teachers and let bridges and buses fall apart. And it's
Right.
like it's really in all of our long-term interest to not let that happen.
Well, thank you, Chuck Collins, for your work, and we look forward to seeing you fighting the fight.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Good being with you.
All right. With Free Speech TV, I'm Chris Rabb. Thank you.